Hello everyone. Hey, today I wanted to talk to you about rental property class. It is very important that you understand this before you ever buy a rental property. Otherwise, you can get yourself in a bad situation thinking you're getting a really high return and it may not pan out to be that. Before we dive into defining that, I thought it'd be good to go through a quick example. So here we have two duplexes for sale. They're both 2 bedroom, 1 bath. About the same square footage. One is listed for $60,000, the other is listed for $130,000. The rent, $1,200 for this one, total rent for adding up both units, and $1,600 for this one. If you guys are not familiar with the 1% rule, it's a rule of thumb used by investors to quickly just kind of analyze a property to see if it makes any sense. And you calculate the 1%. So you want it to be 1% or higher. The higher, in theory, the better. And you get that, you calculate that by dividing the total month rent divided by the price. So in this example, it'd be $1,200 divided by $60,000. So that's 2%. This example is $1,600 divided by $130, which is 1.2%. So with this information, which one do you think is a better investment? I hope you say I don't have enough information, which you'd be correct, because this is where class comes into it. So let me describe these properties. This is in a working class neighborhood. You met the tenants. One's a nurse, one's a electrician. The building looks pretty good. It's a little dated. Maybe needs a little bit of sprucing up, but the yard's nice and clean. Neighborhood's good. The tenants are good people, good hardworking people. This one is in a part of town that you would not go to at night. If you went there during the day, you're probably packing. Your tenants, the owner doesn't really know how they pay for it, how they earn their income. No background check is ran. It's just whoever shows up and has cash, given the most cash up front. This is not something you want to invest in, right? And this is where you can get in trouble if you're just looking at returns. And I have friends that say, "Oh, I bought a duplex for 40 grand. You're paying 130. What? You're comparing apples to oranges. These are not comparable." So this would be an example of a B class, and this would be an example of a D class. So now let's do one more scenario. And let's just say that this one's actually not in that neighborhood I described, right? It is right across the street from duplex 2. This has been owned by the same guy for about 30 to 40 years. He passed away, his kids now have it. In that 30 to 40 years, other than just fixing what absolutely needed to be fixed, he never put a dime into it, so it's looking pretty rough. The tenants, he didn't really do screening, so the tenants are, cause problems in the neighborhood. The neighborhood's complaining to the city never did anything about it. And the kids just want to get rid of it. The cheap price is, one, because they want to get rid of it, and two, it's cheap because they know you've got to put a lot of money into it. Let's say you have to put $40,000 into it, and you can't get bank financing on it. It's in too bad a shape. Banks won't loan on it. So it takes someone with the cash to come in, the 100,000 cash, to do this. So now you come in and you put 100,000 in this. You put 40,000 in repairs, so you have a total 100K in it. Now you can raise your rents to 1,600, and now you're getting 1.6%. 1% rule versus 1.2 if you just bought this. So now this property was being ran, it was in a B class neighborhood, been ran as a C or D property. Now you brought this class up to a B on this property. Because you now got the property fixed up, you got good tenants, and it was in a good neighborhood. The beauty of this is you're obviously making more rent based on your purchase price percentage wise. And you've got $30,000 equity, and I'm assuming this is market rent and market price for a duplex in that area. So now you can go to the bank and get all your money back, maybe more than all your money back with a loan. So this is a home run deal. I love these. They're hard to find. This is a solid investment, nothing wrong with this if you don't have the time or inclination to do this kind of work, but these are the ones I love defining. But anyhow, let's dive into defining class. And that is, defining class is a little bit hard because there's no, I'll say, you talk to different people and you'll get different answers. Even the scale used, some people use A through F, some people use A through C. I like to use A through D. And I may say, if one's on a border between here, I might say it's a B minus or C plus, but typically I just stick with the A through D. And you can put class on neighborhood. Hopefully I spelled it right. The property. And the tenants. The tenants of the little tract, right? Who would want to live there? Now these are, like I said, some of these, especially A, I find A is hard to define, so let's just go through examples. So, neighborhood, it's clean, it's beautiful, not any crime to speak of. The property, typically newer, and I'll go through an example where that is, but when I say newer, it's, maybe 10 years old or less, or 15-year-old or less. And your tenants are typically white-collar workers, right? They're IT workers, or either they're doctors, whatever it may be. You can easily picture this if you think of the neighborhood. There's a new part of town, right? It's been built out recently. There's a lot of IT jobs in the area. On the corner, there's a Starbucks. In the other corner, there's a Panera. All the buildings are new, great condition, no crime. Another kind of example of the neighborhood, maybe it's a little further out in the suburbs or even further out than that, and there's a big company that has their corporate headquarters there. Imagine a subdivision with a bunch of McMansions in it, and right outside there, someone's built a brand new apartment building with swimming pool, gym, hardwood floors, granite countertops, all that good stuff. But you typically talk, when you talk about age of property, when you're talking Class A, but an example I'll give you, I used to work in Cincinnati for about 20 years, I guess. And the block next door at one point about 20 years ago was labeled by a magazine as the most dangerous block in America. We'd go to bars or whatever after work, and you did not leave there after dark and walk back to your car unless you were in a group. It was that dangerous in that neighborhood. Today you go down there and you literally see, a woman wearing her Lululemon, pushing a baby carriage and carrying a Starbucks. It's amazing what's been done in that neighborhood. But that neighborhood was gentrified. Investors came in. They put in tons of money, fixed up the outsides of the buildings, totally gutted insides. So they now have all new granite, countertops, hardwoods, just like all the others. And all new electrical plumbing, all that. Outside's beautiful. There's very little crime in the neighborhood. So even though those properties may be 120 years old, they're really just, the only part's 120 years old is the brick shell on the outside, but everything else is new. So I would personally count those as an A-class property. B-class is a little easier to find. So you think about this neighborhood, you're driving through, there's nice brick ranches. Most of the people in their own home, there's not a lot of rentals, there's a few. Everything's well maintained. You see one house has a service van, it's an electrician living there. Next one may have a police cruiser, but not because someone called the cops, but because the police officer lives there. You can all picture the neighborhood, right? The properties, like I said, they're all well maintained for the most part. There may be one or two that needs a little repair. And the tenants you're attracting are for blue collar workers. So this is a great working class neighborhood, very safe, very little crime at all. C-class, you start to drive in this neighborhood, you're seeing buildings that are a little bit run down, probably need some work, they're older, right? Maybe they're 50, 60, 80-year-old buildings. Some work has been done over them over time if they're super old, but they're still, you can tell they're not perfect, right? The tenants, C-class, a lot of times you're dealing with, Section 8, people on government programs, maybe they're just on Social Security or whatever. Or maybe it's a young couple that one works at a restaurant and the other one works in retail, so they don't make a lot of money and they need an affordable place to live. Overall, it's safe in this neighborhood. Would you leave your car unlocked, or would you leave something valuable sitting out in your yard? No, probably not, but you're not fearing for your life or physical danger in these kind of neighborhoods. D class is where you go, the buildings, the neighborhood, everything's run down, there's buildings boarded up. You would not feel safe walking down that streets at night. Even if you went there during the day, you'd probably be packing heat to even go there during the day. The tenants that would live there, they're just unverified income. The landlord probably has to take whoever shows up and has cash, the most cash on hand. And when they move out, don't pay or whatever, you hose the place down and put new tenants in there. It's not worth investing to bring the property up because the neighborhood's so bad, and that is unless you see the neighborhood turning. So it's not worth it. It is what it is, and you just kind of deal with what you're handed with there. Now, some things to consider on this. So returns, when you look at the different class terms. And when I say returns, think of cap rate, thing like that. The cap rates go up as you go down, typically. I'm not going to count D class in there. I'm just going to say the C class that's generally true because D class is just too unpredictable, right? And then your reliability, and I'm not going to write it down, but return reliability typically goes up, right? These people typically will pay their bills. They're not going to destroy the property, most likely not. This is in general, right? You can put in an A-class person, or tenant, and they destroy the property. But in general, over time, your return reliability goes up because you're going to get paid. But you're making less here, right? This may be selling for a 4 or 6 cap rate, whereas this is an 8 to 10 cap rate. And then finally, the hassle. So as you go down in class, the hassle factor increases, right? You know, you get your property damaged. These people up here, they're working class people or white collar workers or blue collar workers. They're typically not tearing up your property in general. There's always bad ones. There's good tenants in D, there's bad tenants in A, but I'm talking in general. They will typically, the higher you go up the class scale, the more care they take for the property. And it's usually a lot less hassle. Now, that's very general, so please don't beat me up on that because you got good and bad, as I said, in A and D. But that's kind of the high level view of class. Where do I like to invest? I like to stay in B or C. That's where I like to invest. A, my thought on A is this is someone that's wealthy, right? They're already wealthy. They've got a lot of money. They just want to find somewhere to get a safe, decent return. So they're probably comparing a Class A apartment building to maybe buying a Walgreens or Home Depot or KFC, something like that, with a triple net lease. They're not trying to get rich. They're just trying to get a good return, safe return on their money without a lot of hassle. B and C is where I like because the return is typically a lot higher in here than A. And there's a lot more opportunity in these, right? These are new builds usually. They know what they're worth. They're going to want a lot of money for them. Here, you get a lot more opportunity to buy properties, like the second example I was talking about where the kids had the property. You get those kind of opportunities in here. And if you really do a good job on tenant selection, you can minimize your damage and your lost rents and all that stuff and help maintain your return. D class, I personally would not invest in this. I just don't want to deal with the people that would live there primarily. It's not what I like. I like to give people nice, quality, safe places to live. The only exception to D that I could see to invest in D is if you could control your tenant base. So maybe you own a couple of restaurants in the area, or maybe you own a construction company and need a place to house your workers. I wouldn't put them in a dangerous area, but maybe if you're on the outskirts of a D, you could fix up a place. You're controlling your tenants, you know they're going to pay because they're your employees, and you feel pretty good they're not going to destroy the place. That's about the only time I think it would be good to invest potentially in a D. And I know that I even like that for myself. Just because the property, unless the neighborhood's turning, the property's never going to go up in value. I just prefer to stay away from that and stick to these where there's a lot of opportunity to get a really good return. Maybe you can get some appreciation, whether you're forcing it by fixing it up or just in general it goes up. So that is my take on class. If you have any different thoughts about this, please leave it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe like everyone else. I'm trying to get the algorithm to work with me, so thanks for your help on that, and thanks for watching.